The morning light filtered through my kitchen window as I stood at the sink, mechanically washing the same coffee cup for the third time. I'd grown accustomed to the quiet rhythms of my empty house, the way dust motes danced in the sunbeams, the distant hum of traffic on Maple Street, the hollow echo of my footsteps on hardwood floors that once rang with children's laughter. My fingers traced the rim of the ceramic mug, a Mother's Day gift from years past when such gestures still held meaning. The irony wasn't lost on me that I couldn't remember which child had given it to me, Peter or Roger. The details of their childhood kindnesses had blurred into a watercolor wash of memory, while their recent slights remained sharp as broken glass. The phone's shrill ring shattered my morning reverie. I dried my hands slowly, deliberately, before answering. Experience had taught me that family calls rarely brought good news anymore. "Mom?" The voice belonged to Peter, my eldest. Even through the phone, I could hear the practiced tone he used when he wanted something. Too cheerful, too casual. "How are you doing?" "I'm fine," I replied, settling into the kitchen chair that had become my watchtower over this quiet life. "What do you need, Peter?" A pause. In that silence, I heard the rustle of papers, the distant sound of children arguing. His children. My grandchildren, whom I saw perhaps twice a year, despite living only 40 minutes away. Actually, it's about Judy, his wife of 8 years, the daughter-in-law who had systematically reduced my role in their family to that of an occasional babysitter when their regular help fell through. She's been under a lot of stress lately. The kids, her job at the marketing firm, you know how it is. I did know. I knew because I'd raised 2 boys largely on my own after their father decided family life wasn't adventurous enough for him. I knew because I'd worked double shifts at the hospital for 15 years to keep food on the table and save for their college educations. But somehow, my knowledge had become irrelevant in the face of their modern problems. "She was wondering," Peter continued, his voice taking on that wheedling quality that made my jaw clench, "if she could use the lake cabin for a few weeks this summer, just to decompress, get some peace and quiet, maybe do some writing. You know she's always wanted to finish that novel." The lake cabin, my sanctuary, the small piece of heaven I'd bought with my own savings 5 years ago after selling the family home that had become too large and too full of ghosts. Nestled on the shore of Pine Lake, 2 hours north of the city, it was where I went to remember who I was before I became someone's mother, someone's ex-wife, someone's convenient backup plan. "How long is a few weeks?" I asked, though part of me already knew I would say yes. It was my fatal flaw. This inability to completely close the door on my children, even when they treated that door like a revolving entrance to their convenience store. "Maybe 6 weeks? 8 at most. She really needs this, Mom. And you never go there anyway during the hot months." Never go there anyway. The words hit like a physical blow. Last summer, I'd spent nearly every weekend at the cabin, tending the small garden I'd planted, reading on the screened porch, swimming in the early morning hours when the lake was glass smooth and the world felt full of possibility. But my children had stopped asking about my life years ago, so how would Peter know? "I suppose that would be fine," I heard myself saying, the words emerging from some autopilot version of myself. When would she want to go up? Actually, she was hoping to head up this weekend. Get settled in, you know. "I really appreciate this, Mom. Steph will too. She's been so excited about having some quiet time to focus on her projects." Projects? I wondered if that included the elaborate social media presence she maintained, documenting every artfully arranged meal and expertly staged family moment. But I pushed the uncharitable thought away. Perhaps I was being unfair. Perhaps she really did need the solitude. After Peter hung up, without asking about my health, my plans, or my life, I sat in the expanding silence of my kitchen. Through the window, I watched Mrs. Harrison tend to her roses next door. At 78, she moved with purpose and dignity, her small frame radiating the kind of self-possession I envied. She'd buried her husband 2 years ago and had emerged from her grief like a phoenix, joining a hiking club, taking watercolor classes, traveling to see her scattered grandchildren who actually seemed to want her company. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Judy's number. We should coordinate the handover, discuss the quirks of the cabin, how the kitchen faucet had to be turned just so, how the bedroom window stuck in humid weather. But as I started to dial, something stopped me. A small rebellion in my chest. Barely a flutter, but real nonetheless. Instead, I called the cabin's caretaker, Jerry Jones, a weathered man in his 60s who lived year-round on the lake and kept an eye on the summer properties. I'd hired him after my first winter of worry about pipes freezing and storm damage. "Jerry, it's Stella Ward. My daughter-in-law is going to be using the cabin for a few weeks this summer, starting this weekend. Could you make sure everything's in working order? And maybe keep an eye on things while she's there?" "Course, Stella. Good to hear someone's going to be using the place. Shame to let it sit empty all summer when you've got such a nice setup there." All summer. I'd never said all summer to Peter. The discrepancy lodged in my mind like a splinter, small but irritating. After arranging for Jerry to meet Judy with the keys, I tried to return to my morning routine, but the rhythm was broken now, the peace shattered by the familiar weight of family obligations settling on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I wandered into what had once been Roger's bedroom, now converted into a craft room where I pursued the hobbies I'd deferred for decades. Half-finished quilts draped over chairs, watercolor palettes still wet from yesterday's attempt at capturing the sunset I'd seen from my back porch. These small creative pursuits had become my rebellion against a lifetime of putting everyone else's needs first. On the dresser sat a framed photo from last Christmas, the annual gathering at Peter and Judy's house that had become a carefully orchestrated performance. In the picture, we're all smiling, but I can see the tightness around my eyes, the way I'm positioned slightly apart from the family cluster. Even in photographs, I'd become peripheral. That evening, as I prepared a modest dinner for one, my phone buzzed with a text from Judy. "Thanks so much for letting me use the cabin. Can't wait to get some real writing done. You're the best." The casual gratitude, complete with a heart emoji, should have warmed me. Instead, it felt perfunctory, like something dashed off between more important tasks. I typed and deleted several responses before settling on a simple, "You're welcome." But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling where shadows from the streetlight danced, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just set something in motion, something that would change everything. The next morning brought an unusual sight. Roger's car in my driveway. My younger son, now 31, rarely visited without advance notice and a specific agenda. Through the window, I watched him sit in his sedan for a long moment, fingers tapping the steering wheel in the nervous gesture he'd had since childhood. When he finally knocked, I opened the door to find him looking haggard. His usually pristine appearance, he worked in finance downtown, rumpled and strained. "Mom, we need to talk." I led him to the living room, noting how he avoided eye contact, how his hands fidgeted with his phone. Whatever he'd come to discuss, it wasn't going to be pleasant. "I heard Peter asked you about the cabin," he began, then stopped, seeming to wrestle with his words. "Yes, Judy needed some quiet time to write." I settled into my chair, adopting the neutral expression I'd perfected over years of family negotiations. Roger laughed, but there was no humor in it. Right. "Mom, when's the last time you actually talked to Judy? I mean, really talked to her?" A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean? She's been planning this for months. The writing retreat thing is complete bullshit. She's been researching property values up there, taking photos of comparable sales in the area." Roger ran his hands through his hair. "Mom, I think she's planning to sell the cabin." The words hit me like ice water. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the roaring in my ears. She can't sell my cabin. She can if she somehow gets the deed transferred to her name. "And Peter," Roger's voice trailed off, his discomfort palpable. "Peter has been asking me about your financial situation, whether you've been keeping up with bills, if you seem confused about money. He's building a case that you're not capable of managing your own property." The betrayal was so complete, so breathtaking in its audacity, that for a moment I felt detached from my body, watching this scene unfold as if it were happening to someone else. My eldest son and his wife, plotting to steal the one place on earth that truly belonged to me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Roger finally met my eyes. "Because it's wrong. And because I remember what that cabin means to you. You saved for 3 years to buy it, worked overtime shifts even after you should have retired. It's yours, Mom, not ours to take." As Roger left, promising to keep me informed of any developments, I sat alone in my living room feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: fury. Pure, clean, galvanizing rage that burned away the fog of martyrdom I'd been living in for so long. Judy thought I was just a convenient old woman who never goes there anyway. Peter believed I was declining into incompetence, ripe for manipulation. They were both about to discover how wrong they were. But first, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with, and I knew just the person to call. The business card had been sitting in my kitchen drawer for 2 years, ever since my neighbor's nasty divorce proceedings. Danielle Harrison had pressed it into my hands one afternoon over coffee, her eyes still red from crying. "Stella, if you ever need a lawyer who doesn't take anyone's shit, call Elaine Roberts. She saved my life." Now, staring at the elegant black cardstock with its simple gold lettering, I wondered if Elaine Roberts handled cases involving family theft. Only one way to find out. "Roberts Legal, this is Elaine." The voice was crisp, professional, with a slight rasp that suggested someone who'd spent years arguing in courtrooms. "Ms. Roberts, my name is Stella Ward. Danielle Harrison recommended you. I need to speak with someone about preventing the theft of my property." A pause. "Theft by whom?" "My daughter-in-law, and possibly my son." "I see. Can you be in my office in an hour?" Elaine Roberts occupied a corner suite in a downtown building that had seen better decades, but her office radiated competence. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with steel gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally making notes in a leather portfolio. "How certain are you that she intends to sell?" she asked when I finished. "My younger son overheard phone conversations, saw documents, but I need proof." Elaine leaned back in her chair, studying me with the intensity of someone who'd built a career on reading people. "Mrs. Ward, what exactly do you want to happen here? Are you looking to simply stop a sale, or do you want consequences for the attempted theft?" The question hung in the air between us. What did I want? For years, I'd absorbed my family's casual cruelties, their convenient amnesia about my sacrifices, their assumption that I existed primarily for their benefit. Now, faced with their ultimate betrayal, I felt something crystallizing inside me. "I want them to understand that actions have consequences," I said quietly. "I want them to learn that I'm not the helpless old woman they think I am." A slow smile spread across Elaine's face. "Then we're going to get along just fine. First step, we need evidence. How tech-savvy are you? More than my children assume. Good. We're going to set some traps." Over the next 2 hours, Elaine outlined a strategy that was both elegant and ruthless. We would monitor Judy's activities at the cabin, document any attempts to show it to potential buyers, and prepare for multiple legal scenarios. Most importantly, we would do it all quietly, letting Judy and Peter believe they were operating undetected. "One more thing," Elaine said as I prepared to leave. "Be prepared for this to get ugly. Family cases always do. They're going to say terrible things about you, question your competence, maybe even claim you're mentally declining. Can you handle that?" I thought of all the Christmases where I'd been relegated to the kitchen while Judy held court in the living room, all the birthdays forgotten, the grandchildren who barely knew my name, the decades of putting my children's needs above my own, only to discover they viewed my sacrifices as weakness. "Let them try," I said. That afternoon, I drove to the cabin for what I told myself might be the last time as its owner. The 2-hour journey north had always been my decompression ritual, watching the suburbs give way to farmland, then forests, then the first glimpse of Pine Lake through the trees. Today, it felt like a reconnaissance mission. Jerry Jones met me at the gravel driveway, his weathered face creased with concern. "Stella, something you should know. That daughter-in-law of yours? She's been asking a lot of questions about property lines, septic systems, that sort of thing. Not the questions someone asks when they just want to write." We walked through the cabin together, and I saw it through fresh eyes. The cozy living room with its stone fireplace and built-in bookshelves. The kitchen where I'd learned to cook for one again, experimenting with recipes I'd never had time for during my child-rearing years. The bedroom where I'd slept better than I had in decades, lulled by the sound of water lapping against the shore. "Jerry, I need to ask you a favor. If anyone comes looking at this place, real estate agents, potential buyers, I need you to call me immediately. Can you do that? His eyes sharpened with understanding. She's trying to sell your place? It's possible. Jerry spat into the gravel, a gesture of disgust that somehow comforted me. Some people got no shame. Don't worry, Stella. I'll keep watch. Back home that evening, I began phase 2 of Elaine's plan, playing the part of the oblivious victim. I called Peter and left a cheerful voicemail asking how Judy was enjoying her writing retreat. I sent her a text asking if she needed anything from town, complete with a grandmotherly smiley face emoji. Her response came an hour later. So peaceful here, getting so much writing done. Thank you again for letting me use your beautiful place. Each word felt like a knife between my ribs, but I forced myself to respond with appropriate motherly enthusiasm. If she wanted to think of me as a naive old woman, I would give her the performance of a lifetime. The trap was set. Now I had to wait. 3 days later, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. Jerry's voice was tight with anger. Stella, you need to get up here. Now. What's happening? Real estate agent just left. Had 2 couples with her, walking around your property with measuring tapes and calculators. That daughter-in-law of yours was showing them around like she owned the place. My hands were shaking as I ended the call, but not from fear. From rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. I called Elaine immediately. We need to move fast, she said after I explained the situation. I'm filing for an emergency injunction to prevent any sale. We'll also file a criminal complaint for attempted fraud. Can you get up there today? I'm already packing. Stella, when you see her, don't let on that you know anything. Act surprised, maybe a little hurt. We want her to think she's still fooling you. The drive to the cabin passed in a blur of cornfields and fury. I'd never been a vengeful person, had always believed in turning the other cheek, in family loyalty above all else. But there was something liberating about finally allowing myself to feel the full weight of their betrayal. I found Judy on the cabin's deck, laptop open, a glass of wine in her hand despite the early hour. She looked up with a start as I approached, quickly closing the laptop screen. Stella, what a surprise. I thought you never came up here during the week. Never came up here. There it was again, that casual dismissal of my life, my choices, my right to my own property. I wanted to check on you, dear. Make sure you had everything you needed. I sat down across from her, noting how her eyes darted nervously. How's the writing going? Oh, wonderfully. So productive. The peace and quiet is exactly what I needed. She gestured vaguely at the closed laptop. I've gotten more done in 3 days than I have in months. That's wonderful. What kind of story are you working on? For a moment, Judy looked genuinely panicked. Oh, it's a romance. Set in a small lakeside town, actually. This place is such perfect inspiration. I smiled the gentle, believing smile she expected from me. How lovely. I've always admired people who can write fiction. It takes such imagination. We made small talk for another 20 minutes, Judy growing visibly more relaxed as I played my part perfectly. When I finally left, she walked me to my car with the air of someone who'd dodged a bullet. Thanks for checking on me, Stella. You didn't need to drive all this way. Of course I did. Family takes care of family. The irony of those words hung in the air as I drove away, watching her wave in my rearview mirror. If she only knew what was coming. That evening, back in my own kitchen, I called Roger to update him on the situation. His silence stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Mom, are you sure about this? Taking legal action against Peter and Judy? It's going to tear the family apart. Roger, what family? The one where I'm ignored except when they need something? Where my own son plots to steal my property because he thinks I'm too senile to notice? I surprised myself with the steel in my voice. That family was torn apart long before I decided to fight back. But Mom, no buts. I spent years putting your needs and your brother's needs above my own. I sacrificed my career, my dreams, my chance at love after your father left, all for you boys. And this is how I'm repaid? With theft and lies and the assumption that I'll just roll over and take it? Another long silence. When Roger spoke again, his voice was small. What can I do to help? The question surprised me. You've already done more than enough by warning me. But Roger, when this all comes out, you need to decide which side you're on. Because there are going to be sides. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen and tried to remember the last time I'd felt this clear about anything. For years, I'd drifted through life like smoke, insubstantial and easily dispersed. But Judy's betrayal had given me something I hadn't realized I'd lost. A reason to fight. Tomorrow, Elaine would file the injunction. Tomorrow, the first domino would fall. And after that, Peter and Judy would discover that the helpless old woman they'd been manipulating was capable of things they'd never imagined. I poured myself a glass of wine and raised it in a toast to my empty kitchen. To consequences, I said aloud. The war was about to begin. The courthouse felt like a cathedral of justice, all marble columns and echoing footsteps. I sat beside Elaine in the gallery, watching her organize documents with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Across the aisle, Peter and Judy huddled with their hastily retained attorney, a nervous young man who kept checking his phone and shuffling papers. When Peter had called 3 days ago, his voice shaking with rage and disbelief, I'd almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Mom, what the hell is this injunction? You're trying to stop Judy from using the cabin? After we asked permission? This is insane. I'd let the silence stretch, savoring his confusion. Peter, did you really think I wouldn't find out? Find out what? Mom, you're not making sense. Maybe we should talk about getting you some help. Someone to manage your affairs. The help I need, I'd interrupted, my voice steady as stone, is a good lawyer, which I have. See you in court. Now, watching Judy whisper frantically to their attorney, I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. She wore a demure rose dress and minimal makeup, clearly coached to look like the innocent victim of a vindictive mother-in-law. But I could see the panic in her darting eyes, the way her hands trembled as she pretended to review documents. Judge Ruth Anderson entered with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd seen every type of family dispute imaginable. She was perhaps my age, with silver hair and the weary expression of someone who'd lost her illusions about human nature long ago. This is an emergency hearing regarding plaintiff Stella Ward's motion for preliminary injunction against defendants Peter Ward and Judy Ward, preventing the sale or transfer of property located at 142 Pine Lake Road. Judge Anderson looked up from her notes. Ms. Roberts, you may proceed. Elaine stood with the confident grace of a predator. Your Honor, this case involves the attempted theft of my client's property through fraud and manipulation. Mrs. Ward purchased the lake cabin in question 5 years ago with her own funds. Recently, her daughter-in-law requested permission to use the cabin for what she claimed was a writing retreat. Instead, defendants have been secretly preparing to sell the property, likely through forged documents or coercive manipulation of the elderly Mrs. Ward. I bristled slightly at being called elderly, but Elaine caught my eye and winked. Everything was strategy. We have evidence that the defendant Judy Ward has brought real estate agents and potential buyers to view the property, misrepresenting her ownership rights. We ask for an immediate injunction to prevent any sale or transfer of this property. The opposing attorney, Malkin, according to his business card, stood shakily. Your Honor, this is a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. My client simply wanted to help Mrs. Ward, who has been showing signs of confusion about her financial affairs. The property in question represents a significant asset that may be too much for her to manage alone. The condescension in his voice made my jaw clench, but I forced myself to remain still. Elaine had warned me this would happen. Furthermore, Malkin continued, gaining confidence, my client, Mrs. Judy Ward, has made significant improvements to the property during her stay, increasing its value. Any discussions about potential sale were preliminary conversations about what might be best for the family's financial security. Judge Anderson looked unimpressed. Mr. Malkin, who holds the deed to this property? Well, Mrs. Stella Ward, and who has legal authority to sell it? Mrs. Ward, however we believe she may not be competent to. Has any court declared Mrs. Ward incompetent? No, Your Honor, but then she retains all rights to her property. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Ward, do you wish to sell your cabin? I stood, feeling the weight of the moment. No, Your Honor, I do not. I never gave anyone permission to sell my property, and I never will. The injunction is granted. No sale or transfer of the Pine Lake property may proceed without court approval. Now, Ms. Roberts, you mentioned evidence of fraud? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. Elaine nodded to me, and I pulled out my phone, opening the voice recording app I'd learned to use with surprising ease. Your Honor, 3 days ago I returned to the cabin unannounced and recorded my conversation with Judy Ward. With the court's permission, I'd like to play a portion of that recording. Judge Anderson nodded, and I pressed play. My voice filled the courtroom, sweet and trusting. How's the writing going? Then Judy's voice, confident and lying. Oh, wonderfully. So productive. I've gotten more done in 3 days than I have in months. It's a romance, set in a small lakeside town. I stopped the recording. Your Honor, during this conversation, Judy Ward claimed to be writing fiction. However, we have evidence that during those same 3 days, she brought multiple real estate agents and potential buyers to view the property. Elaine stepped forward with a folder. We have photographs taken by the property caretaker, Mr. Jerry Jones, showing Mrs. Judy Ward conducting what appear to be real estate showings. We also have testimony from Mr. Jones about the defendant's inquiries regarding property values, septic systems, and other details relevant to a sale, not to writing a novel. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of Judy's sharp breathing. I watched the color drain from her face as she realized the scope of what we'd documented, but Elaine wasn't finished. Your Honor, we've also discovered that Mrs. Judy Ward has been researching methods to have elderly relatives declared incompetent in order to assume control of their assets. Our private investigator found browser history and printed documents in her possession. The young attorney looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Peter was staring at his wife with an expression of growing horror, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. Furthermore, Elaine continued, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade, we believe there may be additional victims. Mrs. Judy Ward's previous employment at Henderson Marketing was terminated under suspicious circumstances involving client fund misappropriation. We request a full investigation into her financial activities. Judy shot to her feet, her careful composure finally cracking. This is ridiculous. I was trying to help the family. Stella barely uses that cabin, and it's just sitting there. Mrs. Ward, Judge Anderson interrupted sharply, you will address the court through your attorney. But the damage was done. Judy had just admitted to planning the sale in open court. Her attorney grabbed her arm, pulling her back into her seat while whispering urgently in her ear. Judge Anderson studied the documents Elaine had submitted, her expression growing colder by the minute. Mr. Malkin, does your client wish to make a statement about these allegations? Malkin looked at Judy, who was now openly crying, makeup smearing down her cheeks. Your Honor, we request time to review these materials and prepare a response. Time is granted. However, the injunction stands, and I'm ordering a full financial investigation into both defendants' recent activities. This court takes attempted elder fraud very seriously. She banged her gavel. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks. As people filed out of the courtroom, Peter approached me, his face a mask of pain and confusion. Mom, I swear I didn't know about the other stuff. The job thing, the browser searches. I thought we were just trying to help you manage things better. For a moment, looking at my eldest son's stricken face, I felt the old maternal instinct kick in, the urge to comfort him, to smooth over the conflict, to absorb his pain as I'd done throughout his childhood. But then I remembered the casual cruelty of his phone call, his assumption that I never went there anyway, his willingness to believe I was incompetent rather than investigate his wife's lies. Peter, I said quietly, you thought I was losing my mind, but you never once came to check on me yourself. You thought I was too confused to manage my own property, but you didn't think I deserved honesty about what you were planning. You've treated me like a burden for years, and the moment you saw a chance to profit from that attitude, you took it. But Mom, no. The word came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't soften it. You chose to believe the worst about me rather than question your wife's motives. You chose to see me as an obstacle to your financial gain, rather than as your mother who sacrificed everything for you and your brother. Those were your choices, Peter. Now you get to live with the consequences. I walked away, leaving him standing alone in the echoing courthouse corridor. Outside, Elaine was waiting by her car, a satisfied smile on her face. How do you feel? I considered the question seriously. How did I feel? For the first time in years, I felt solid, real, like a person who took up space in the world and had the right to defend that space. I feel like myself again, I said finally. Good, because we're not done. That investigation is going to turn up some very interesting things about your daughter-in-law. Are you prepared for whatever we might find? I thought about Judy's tears, her desperate lies, her willingness to destroy an old woman's peace for financial gain. I thought about Peter, so quick to assume my incompetence, so slow to question his wife's honesty. Bring it all to light, I said. Every last secret. As I drove home through the lengthening afternoon shadows, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, the quiet satisfaction of a battle well fought. But this was only the beginning. The real reckoning was yet to come. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 10 days after the courthouse victory. I was tending my small herb garden, a new hobby I'd taken up since reclaiming my autonomy, when my phone rang. Elaine's voice carried an undercurrent of excitement that made me set down my watering can. Stella, we need to meet. The investigation results are in, and they're more damning than we could have hoped. Can you be at my office in an hour? I'll be there. As I drove downtown, I found myself thinking about the past week and a half. The silence from Peter had been deafening. No calls, no texts, no awkward attempts at reconciliation. Roger had reached out twice, brief conversations where he seemed to be testing the waters, trying to gauge whether his loyalty should lie with his brother or his mother. I'd made it clear that neutrality wasn't an option, but it was the unexpected phone call from my granddaughter Clara that had surprised me most. At 19, she was Peter and Judy's eldest, a college sophomore I barely knew, despite years of sending birthday cards and Christmas gifts that were acknowledged with perfunctory thank you texts. Grandma Stella? Her voice had been small, uncertain. I heard about what happened in court. With Mom and Dad, I mean. Is it true what Dad said about Mom trying to sell your cabin? Yes, Clara. It's true. A long pause. She told us you were getting confused about money and stuff, that you needed help managing things. The casual repetition of their lies stung, but I kept my voice steady. What do you think, Clara? In all your interactions with me, have I seemed confused? Another pause, longer this time. No. Actually, you've always seemed sharper than most adults I know, more honest. That conversation had haunted me for days. How many lies had they told about me? How thoroughly had they poisoned my grandchildren against me? Elaine's office felt different this time, charged with the electricity of impending victory. She had documents spread across her desk like a general planning a final assault. Sit down, Stella. You're going to want to be sitting for this. I settled into the leather chair, noting how Elaine's usual composed demeanor had given way to something fiercer, more predatory. The financial investigation uncovered a pattern going back 7 years, she began, sliding a thick folder across the desk. Judy Ward, née Judy Jones before she married Peter, has been systematically defrauding elderly clients and family members. My blood chilled. How many victims? At least 6 that we can prove. Her previous job at Henderson Marketing ended when they discovered she'd been siphoning funds from elderly clients' accounts. She convinced them to sign over power of attorney for simplified financial management, then used their access to transfer money to accounts she controlled. I thought of all the times Judy had offered to help me with my banking, suggesting I switch to online management, offering to set up automatic bill payments. How close had I come to falling into her trap? The browser history from her laptop is particularly revealing, Elaine continued. Searches for how to have elderly parent declared incompetent, power of attorney forms, signs of dementia in older adults. She's been planning this for months, possibly years. What about Peter? How much did he know? Elaine's expression softened slightly. That's more complicated. The evidence suggests he was manipulated as much as you were, but he was willfully blind to obvious red flags. She convinced him you were declining mentally by staging incidents, hiding your keys and then finding them, moving items around your house when she visited, creating confusion and then positioning herself as the solution. The methodical cruelty of it took my breath away. All those times I'd questioned my own memory, wondered if I was losing my sharpness, blamed myself for misplacing things. She'd been deliberately undermining my confidence in my own mind. There's more, Elaine said grimly. The cabin wasn't her endgame. It was her test run. She's been researching your finances extensively. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, the value of your house. She was planning to have you declared incompetent and gain control of everything. I stared at the documents, seeing my own financial information laid out with clinical precision. Account numbers I'd never shared with anyone, asset valuations, even copies of my will that she must have accessed somehow. How much? I asked quietly. Your total assets? Just over $1.2 million. The number hung in the air between us. My life savings, my security, my legacy for my children and grandchildren, all of it targeted for theft by someone I'd welcomed into my family. What's our next move? I asked, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Criminal charges. The district attorney is very interested in this case, especially given the pattern of elder abuse. Judy is looking at multiple felony counts. And Stella? Elaine leaned forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. The buyer who was interested in your cabin? He's agreed to testify about their conversations. Apparently, Judy told him some very interesting things about you. Such as? That you were in early-stage dementia and the family was helping you transition to a care facility. She even showed him fake medical documents she'd created to support the sale. The forgery charge alone would add years to any potential sentence. I should have felt satisfaction, but instead I felt hollow, emptied out by the sheer scope of the betrayal. When will charges be filed? Tomorrow morning. There will be a press conference. This kind of systematic elder abuse is something the DA wants to publicize as a warning to other families. I drove home in a daze, the weight of the revelations pressing down on me like a physical force. In my kitchen, I made tea with hands that trembled slightly, then sat at the table where I'd taken that first manipulative phone call from Peter 3 weeks ago. My phone buzzed. A text from Roger. Mom, can we talk? I heard rumors about criminal charges. I called him back immediately. Roger, are you somewhere private? Yeah, I'm in my car. Mom, what's happening? Peter called me completely hysterical. Something about Judy being arrested? Not yet, but tomorrow she will be. Roger, I need you to listen carefully. I told him everything. The investigation results, the pattern of fraud, the forged medical documents, the systematic manipulation. Roger's silence stretched so long I began to worry the call had dropped. Jesus Christ, he finally whispered. Mom, I'm so sorry. I knew something was off about her, but this is criminal. It is criminal, literally. What can I do? How can I help? For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of warmth toward one of my sons. Just be prepared for what's coming. This is going to destroy Peter, and the children are going to need someone stable in their lives. The kids don't know? Not yet, but they will soon enough. That evening, I called Clara. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. Grandma, Dad's been acting really weird. He came home early from work and locked himself in his office. Mom keeps crying and making phone calls. What's happening? I closed my eyes, thinking of this young woman who barely knew me, who'd been fed lies about my mental competence for years, who was about to watch her world implode. Clara, your mother is going to be arrested tomorrow for fraud and elder abuse. Not just against me, against multiple people over several years. The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Clara, are you there? I'm here. Her voice was small, shocked. Grandma, are you okay? Really okay, I mean? I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than I've been in years, actually. Would it be okay if I came to see you? After all this settles down? I think I'd like to get to know the real you, not the version Mom and Dad told us about. The unexpected gift of her words brought tears to my eyes. I would love that, Clara. More than you know. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house and tried to process the day's revelations. Tomorrow, Judy would be arrested. Peter would face the collapse of his marriage and his complicity in attempted fraud. The grandchildren would learn that their mother was a criminal and their father was, at best, a fool. I should have felt triumphant. Justice was being served, consequences were falling where they belonged, and the truth was finally emerging from years of carefully constructed lies. Instead, I felt something more complex. A deep, abiding satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with reclaiming my own truth. For years, I'd doubted my own perceptions, questioned my own judgment, accepted their version of reality over my own. Now I knew. I wasn't confused, declining, or incompetent. I was a woman who'd been systematically manipulated by someone skilled in the art of psychological abuse, and I was a woman strong enough to fight back and win. Tomorrow would bring the final reckoning, but tonight, for the first time in years, I felt completely, unshakably certain of who I was, and that was victory enough. The arrest happened at 6:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, precisely as Elaine had predicted. I knew because Roger called me immediately afterward, his voice shaking with a mixture of disbelief and vindication. "Mom, they just took her away in handcuffs, in front of the whole neighborhood. Peter is... I've never seen him like this. He's completely broken." I should have felt something. Triumph, satisfaction, perhaps even pity. Instead, I felt the peculiar emptiness that comes after a long battle finally ends. How are the children? Clara's the only one who seems to understand what's happening. The younger two are confused, scared. Peter isn't handling it well. He's alternating between rage at Judy and trying to blame you for destroying the family. I didn't destroy anything, Roger. I simply refused to let it be stolen from me. I know. God, Mom, I know. I should have seen it sooner. We all should have. The local news coverage was more extensive than I'd anticipated. By noon, my phone was ringing constantly. Reporters wanting statements, neighbors expressing shock, distant relatives emerging from years of silence to offer support I'd never needed from them before. I turned off my phone and drove to the cabin. The 2-hour journey felt different now. This wasn't an escape or a retreat. It was a homecoming to a place that was unquestionably, legally, irrevocably mine. As I pulled into the gravel driveway, Jerry Jones appeared from his workshop, his weathered face creased with something that looked remarkably like pride. "Stella, saw the news this morning. About time someone held that woman accountable." We sat on the dock, feet dangling in the cool lake water, while Jerry filled me in on the chaos of the past few weeks. Judy had indeed brought multiple potential buyers through the property, each time spinning elaborate lies about my mental state and the family's need to help me transition to care. That last couple, the Hendersons from Chicago, they were real interested until I started asking questions about the actual owner's consent. Woman got real nervous, started talking fast about power of attorney and family decisions. I knew something wasn't right. "Thank you for watching out for me, Jerry." "Hell, Stella, this is your place. You put your heart into it, made it what it is. Nobody had the right to take that from you." That evening, as I sat on the screened porch reading by lamplight, I heard a car on the gravel drive. Through the window, I saw Clara climbing out of a small sedan, her movements hesitant but determined. I met her at the door, noting how much she'd grown since I'd last seen her at Christmas. Taller, more mature, with an air of quiet resolve that reminded me powerfully of myself at her age. "I hope it's okay that I came," she said, her voice uncertain. "I needed to get away from the house. It's pretty awful right now. Of course it's okay. This is your grandmother's house, Clara. You're always welcome here." I made us tea, and we sat in the living room while she struggled to find words for what she was feeling. Finally, she looked directly at me with eyes that held more wisdom than any 19-year-old should possess. "I've been thinking about all the times Mom said you were getting confused, forgetting things, acting strange. But every time I talked to you directly, you seemed completely normal. More than normal. You seemed like the only adult in my life who actually listened to what I was saying. Your mother is very skilled at creating false narratives," I said carefully. "She made your father believe I was declining, and she made me doubt my own perceptions. It's called gaslighting, and it's a form of psychological abuse." Clara nodded slowly. "I looked it up after Dad told us what happened. The definition fits everything perfectly." She was quiet for a moment, then, "Grandma, I'm sorry. For believing her stories, for not visiting more, for not really knowing you. You were a child, Clara. Children believe what their parents tell them. That's normal and healthy. I'm not a child anymore." Her voice carried a note of steel that reminded me of my own awakening. "And I want to know who you really are. Not the version of you they created, but the actual you." We talked until nearly midnight. I told her about my years as a nurse, the satisfaction of helping people in their most vulnerable moments. about raising her father and uncle largely on my own, working double shifts to keep them fed and clothed and educated, about buying this cabin with money I'd saved penny by penny, about the peace I found here after years of putting everyone else's needs first. She told me about college, her major in social work, her dream of helping elderly people navigate the complex systems designed to protect them, or in some cases, exploit them. "I think I want to specialize in elder advocacy," she said quietly. "After seeing what Mom tried to do to you, I realize how vulnerable older people can be to this kind of abuse." When she left the next morning, Clara hugged me tightly, fiercely, like someone claiming what she'd thought was lost. "I'm going to come back next weekend if that's okay. And maybe we could start having regular calls. I feel like I have 20 years of catching up to do. I would love that more than you know." The trial, when it came 6 months later, was swift and devastating. Elaine had built an airtight case, and Judy's pattern of abuse was so clear that even her defense attorney seemed resigned to minimizing rather than disputing the charges. She received 18 months in federal prison and was ordered to pay restitution to all her victims, a sum that would bankrupt her completely. Peter attended every day of the trial, sitting in the back row with the haunted expression of a man watching his life's assumptions crumble. He'd filed for divorce within a week of Judy's arrest, moved into a small apartment, and begun the difficult process of explaining to his younger children why their mother wouldn't be coming home for a very long time. On the final day, as the judge read the sentence, Peter approached me in the courthouse hallway. He looked older, grayer, diminished in ways that had nothing to do with physical appearance. "Mom, I know I don't have the right to ask for forgiveness, but I need you to know that I never understood what she was really doing. I genuinely thought we were helping you." I studied his face, looking for the boy I'd raised, the young man I'd sacrificed so much for. He was still there, underneath the pain and regret. But he was also a stranger, someone who'd been willing to believe the worst about me rather than question his wife's motives. "Peter, you chose to see me as a burden rather than as your mother. You chose to believe I was incompetent rather than investigate why I might seem confused. Those were your choices, and they have consequences. I know, is there any chance we could try to rebuild something? For the kids' sake, if not for mine?" I considered his words, feeling Clara's recent presence in my life like a warm counterpoint to this moment. "The children are always welcome in my life, Peter. You know where to find me when you're ready to see me as I actually am, rather than as you need me to be." It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't complete rejection either. It was something harder and more honest. The promise of possibility, contingent on genuine change. A year later, I stood on the cabin's dock watching Clara teach her younger cousins to fish. Roger's children had become regular visitors, and even Peter's younger two had begun tentative relationships with the grandmother they'd been taught to see as frail and confused. Peter himself remained at the periphery of our rebuilt family constellation. He called occasionally, sent awkward birthday cards, showed up for major holidays with the careful politeness of someone still earning his place. I neither encouraged nor discouraged these overtures. Time would tell whether his remorse would translate into genuine understanding. The lake reflected the late afternoon sun like scattered diamonds, and I felt the deep contentment that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth. I'd discovered something many people never learn, that the most profound victory isn't destroying your enemies, but refusing to let them define you. Judy had tried to steal more than my property. She'd tried to steal my sense of self, my confidence in my own mind, my right to dignity in my later years. Her failure wasn't just legal, it was existential. I remained exactly who I'd always been, a woman of intelligence, strength, and uncompromising integrity. As the sun set over Pine Lake, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I felt grateful for the betrayal that had awakened me from years of passive acceptance. Sometimes the greatest gift your enemies can give you is forcing you to remember your own power. I was Stella Ward. I owned this beautiful place through my own efforts and sacrifices. I was loved by grandchildren who knew my true worth, and I was finally completely free. The war was over, and I had won